Bismillah. Bismillah.
Okay. Billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Allahumma ihdina fi man hadayt wa afina fi man afayt wa tawallana fi man tawallayt wa barik lana fi ma atayt wa qina wasrif anna sharra ma qadayt fa innaka tuqdi bil haqq wa la yuqda alayk إنه لا يذل من وليد ولا يعز من عاديت تباركت ربنا وتعاليت فلك الحمد على ما قضيت ولك الشكر على ما أنعمت به علينا وأوليت اللهم ارحمنا بالقرآن واجعله لنا إماما نورا هدى ورحمة اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وأتباعه أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين آمين. Assalamu alaikum. Inshallah, we will continue reading from the 12th word. We are towards the end of the section, reading the 4th principle and the 2nd point. Last week, we spent most of our time, if not all the time, on discussing this first paragraph. I will give a brief summary, and if there are any points that attracted your attention from last week, it would be helpful for you to share before we move on to this new, it's a separate point, and a different type of discussion. Generally, this section has been about how to read the Quran and our approach and our expectations, our attitude towards confirming its nature and claims. From last week specifically, we discussed that what the word of God means. It represents the quality of perfect, concise and comprehensiveness. There were helpful example about a vast book in which each letter in this book provided that, it is authored and meaningful, means that every letter in it, no matter how insignificant it might be, demonstrates a purpose and meaning that cannot be explained by just random happenings or chance. It just can't happen, or neither can it just point to a source within itself. It, in fact, necessitates that whoever put that specific thing in this vast and seemingly endless, what we call universe, but we all are also understanding as the speech or the words of God, must have the quality to compose the entire text, because it knows exactly where this particular piece or word or element goes. And it demonstrates that something as vast, continuous, meaningful, precise sort of composition and creation cannot be the result of anything of a created nature. And it is not within the capacity of anything that is created itself. And hence, to the reader, this becomes a continuous and meaningful experience of reading something. It becomes a source of guidance and teaching for the one who is searching or hungry for such guidance and teaching. So those are some of the main points that I had from last week. Before we get into the second paragraph, and as I understand, because we're nearing the end of the section, some of the points will be highlighted again in different manners and will be addressed again. So we can also sort of read and see where the author seems to re-emphasize something that we have read and where we might need to also reflect further in a different aspect. So if you have anything from this paragraph that might have caught your attention from last week, any word you did not understand, want to bring it up, you may. And I'll wait for you can do it at any time, but if not, then I'm happy to begin reading this following paragraph. And it will take us into a slightly different direction, but something that we started the fourth principle with. So, Bismillah. In respect to the other divine words, they are speech which has become evident through a particular regard, a minor title through the partial manifestation of a particular name, through a particular dominicality, special sovereignty, a private mercy. Their degrees vary in regard to particularity and universality. Most inspiration is of this sort, but its degrees vary greatly. For example, the most particular and simple is the inspiration of the animals. Then there is the inspiration of the ordinary people. Then the inspiration of ordinary angels. Then the inspiration of the saints. Then the inspiration of the higher angels. Thus, it is for this reason that a saint who offers supplications directly without means by the telephone of the heart says, "My heart tells me news of my sustainer." He does not say, "It tells me of the sustainer of all the worlds." And he says, "My heart is the mirror, the throne of my sustainer." He does not say, "It is the throne of the sustainer of all the worlds." For he can manifest the address to the extent of its capacity and to the degree nearly 70,000 veils have been raised. Thus, however much higher and more elevated is the decree of a king promulgated in respect of his supreme sovereignty than the insignificant speech of a common man, and however much more abundantly the effulgence of the sun in the sky may be benefited from than the manifestation of its reflection in a mirror, and however greater is its superiority to that degree, or its superiority. To that degree, the Quran of mighty stature is superior to all other speech and all other books. All right. I'll move. So if a few weeks ago, I missed that class, but I think people here attended it. The beginning of the fourth principle started with the author sharing about different forms of divine speech. And our main, I think, most of the discussion and emphasis has been mostly so far has been on one form of it, which is what we call revelation. And in the form of words, speech, but also in the form of creation. The author now is reminding us again of other forms of speech, which includes this another type, which is called inspiration. And so certainly there are different kinds of speech, they function differently, they are received differently, their purposes are different, their significance is different for an individual and for mankind, so in terms of their universality. And just to begin, I understand that it's a way for the author or for us to understand what exactly the Quranic speech is, or the word of God is, comparing to all other forms of divine speech. So before we all together go into parsing out what is inspiration, what is revelation, what are the differences, what are their significances, and perhaps with examples help each other understand the differences as best as we can. I'd like to just ask, because I wasn't here for a couple of weeks ago and I missed listening to that lecture, but it would be helpful for me to know what you already might have discussed when in regards to the two kinds of addresses. And if you remember, it was this example of the king speaking on his private telephone with the subject about a minor matter, some private need, and then the king speaking as a sovereign to his entire, let's say, kingdom. An example for our purposes could be, a mayor or a president or some sort of position like that, speaking to a crowd or his municipality as a public address. And then perhaps that person, let's say a mayor, also has a restaurant. And his speech to his employees, to his patrons, in that context will be specific, will be private, will be particular to their capacity as such, and he speaks from a particular aspect or quality or role that he espouses in that place. So someone who visits the restaurant cannot take what the mayor says to them as something that could be applied to the entire community, but it will have its various degrees of, as it says, the degree varies. Sometimes it will be probably very particular and has no relevance to the community as a whole. And sometimes it might have some relevance. It just depends on, as we can sort of understand from this paragraph, to the different levels of the individuals and beings that receive that inspiration. So before I go into a little bit more detail, understanding the particulars of the paragraph, are there any questions, thoughts, notes that people remember or want to bring up that perhaps caught their attention or they want to understand better? Feel free to help me, summarize or revise things that are already said. Brother Ali.
I don't remember exactly in which, what details we have talked about it, but you summarized it very well, actually, with the example of mayor. And thank you for this. But I would just add to it a little bit clarification or really further explanation rather than something new or to completely new. We have to understand that, as your beautiful example made it clear for us, that mayor may announce a statement or a rule concerns the whole citizens of the city. And of course, he will announce it with the, spokesman of the city, because he will have somebody who declares it, who announces that mayor decided, or nowadays the mayor cannot decide by itself with the council that they have, city council. But of course, it is an example just to let us understand, help us understand that God is sovereign. So he doesn't really have a council, doesn't need anybody to have a consultation with, etc. So mayor says, okay, go and explain my decision according to the capacity of the whole population, and make it clear that everybody understands it, because this rule or this decision is concerned with every individual citizen of the city, regardless of their education level, understanding capacity, but make it clear that everybody can understand. That's why he has to employ somebody who, from among the people of the city, citizens of the city, from among the citizens of the city who can really transfer this decision at their own level, because mayor doesn't know the people. This people or the example doesn't know the people, but mayor knows that which kind of ruling this city population needs it. This example of mayor doesn't know, but of course we are going to use it for God. God knows and makes the statement, prepares the statement in such a way that everybody can understand. And this, what was the word, spokesman, will apply it at the level of the people, demonstrate it at the level of the people, that everybody can really practically see what the ruling is or requires of the people. Because in the example, God is absolute. When absolute speaks with or within the term, absolute terms, that is something maybe we take it for granted that God speaks and God knows, but we have to understand, if God, the creator, because the creator is not of the nature of the created beings, so what is expected in this case from human side, from our perspective, if he speaks in terms of what knowledge comes from absolute source, but if he speaks as an absolute being, we cannot really comprehend it. Like the universe, God's qualities are absolute, must be absolute. We conclude by studying the universe that its creator's qualities must be absolute. Okay, but the absolute manifests itself in such a way that we call it the universe, the beings in the universe, and we can easily communicate with the universe. So the speech of the creator also, excuse me. Okay.
Hopefully, it won't be long before Brother Ali can complete his comment. I just wanted to reiterate one of the points that he had, which was actually a very important one, and I missed it, about the mediation and revelation, that it is brought to mankind through a messenger who receives it through the angel Gabriel in this case. Brother Ali, please continue.
Excuse me. Now I have a very limited time, please. I don't. Sorry, you may go ahead, but
no, I was just summarizing the.
All right.
main point.
Just a minute, I have no time. So I have to continue. So if God speaks in absolute terms, we cannot comprehend it. That's why he employs somebody from among the citizens of this universe, if you like, so that he will receive the message and declare it and put it into practice. That's what is important. Put it into practice so that everybody will understand what the content of this speech is. But whereas when he speaks, in your example of the mayor, when he speaks to other people, he speaks to them according to their professions. As you said, he may have a restaurant, private property, and he may speak to the repair guy or workers, his employees, according to their profession, their position, and at their capacity. He may speak to a child in a childish language that is appropriate for the child, not for me. That's why the inspirations are various, and depending on the capacity of the addressee, they have different appearances, if you like. That is, we have to remember, according to the capacity of the persons, he speaks personally in order to guide him within his capacity. Thank you very much.
Jazakallah. Yes, I was just saying before, I think that was a very important point, that inspiration is direct, as in, there is no intermediary, and it is not necessarily, as you were saying in the example of the child and in the author's writings in the example of the animals, it's not necessarily language, but it is some form of meaning, or someone has to interpret it in their own individual circumstance, capacity, ability, and it may or may not be legible to others, depending on their the universality of that message. Whereas revelation is, for us, brought to us by another human being who was given to this revelation through the angel, Gabriel in this case. And what it addresses is universally applicable and actually valid, and concerns the universal experiences, whereas an inspiration is personal, and it does not concern, it's not binding in that sense, as what we understand inspiration to, revelation to be. And
yeah, I just wanted to maybe add something.
Please go ahead.
There. So one example that comes to my mind, and the mayor example was nice. I would just instead of the restaurant, the second part of the mayor example, instead of him having a restaurant, I think of perhaps he has somebody in the office that makes him coffee, for instance. So again, one of his, under his jurisdiction, and but he comes in and says, well, maybe my son is not able to buy. I mean, none of this really quite applies in contemporary conditions where the mayors don't have, as Dr. Ali said, the sovereignty of a king doing whatever they want, and whatever they want, everything belongs to them, so they can do whatever they want. We don't have that analogy anymore. But so this mayor's coffee maker, comes to him and knocks. He has access to him and says, well, dear mayor, my son is not able to find a job. And the mayor says, okay, well, we'll employ him in my other estate or my other, no problem, we took care of it. So he had a private need. And then, he talked to the mayor in private, and in private, the mayor took care of his need. It's very different from the mayor getting, as you said, giving an order or a rule that applies to everyone in that, that concerns the whole municipality. And one example that I want to share, what does this mean for my life? So when I have a particular need, and perhaps nobody else around me has that particular situation, I'm stuck in a particular dilemma, or my very beloved mom is sick in this one particular way, and circumstance and so on, and I have a need, shall I move to that town, or shall I do this, shall I do that? I have all these things and I need guidance. And the way I reach out to my Rabb and get inspiration or a calling about what I should do is a very different way of being inspired than, when the prophet, as it was said, with the medium, brings a message from the sustainer of the heavens and the earth. And let's say, the universal rule that in the Quran it says, if you are grateful, I will definitely increase to you. That's what the Prophet recited from Rabb al-Alameen, and that has so many. It's a universal rule. It's going to apply to anyone, anywhere, and it has deep layers of meaning. That is also God's speech, but it's very different from me being inspired or feeling a calling in my own circumstances and having my little private conversation. That's what I'm thinking, but I'm also not sure, because is it making it too personal? Is it when we talk to God, in our hearts, is it always a limited talk? I'm not sure, but this example, I find it's a bit helpful.
Jazakallah. No, I think you raised important points that we should also talk about. And I did understand inspiration, given the fact that it is also to animals, it has different levels and degrees. I do understand the concept of inspiration as one that is also happening all around us, from within us. And so it is always there, but perhaps what is required of us is to interpret it and understand. And so I remember this distinction from in a past discussion on the topic, that an inspiration can be both angelic and satanic, but it is up to us to make sure that our mirror and our capacity is developed such that we're able to distinguish and interpret with with an ability that recognizes and makes that matter clear for us. So I think there are two forms still of inspiration, whereas revelation is direct in the sense that it is not the speech that is revealed is clear in words, in speech, and though we interpret that too, we don't make meaning out, translate it into a language that these thoughts are coming to our mind and we have to translate, give it a form. But it comes with that form. And I think the point that was related around the fact that the spokesperson has to demonstrate or has demonstrated or must demonstrate for the public such that it is understood beyond doubt, beyond sort of confusion, possibly when it comes to revelation. And so the acts combined with the speech, clear the matter, which is not the same degree of clarity that is implied in inspiration, because inspiration requires us to still be discerning about, okay, I'm getting this thought about what to do regarding whether to take this job, whether to move or not. Which one is actually coming, from the angelic or the side that refers directly without biases and sort of, let's say, corruptions of my own desires, and what is, what is the angelic side and what is actually not true for me in that sense. So there is a level of interpretation required from our perspectives. And so hence I understand that the more someone, or these different levels of the animals, the ordinary people, the angels, the saints, are just representing different degrees of, let's say, capacity that someone has built in them. And I would understand that someone who has developed themselves to a capacity of reflecting themselves and understanding who they are in their reality, without, as we call, biases or misappropriation. Potentially, the more universal that message might be, as helpful to others, but not necessarily binding on them that they must do this. But it might, as we are talking in this section about the topic of wisdom, it serves as wisdom, as teachings that others may or may not follow, depending on how they relate their own situation to the one who has shared. And so I thought your example was very helpful in particularizing that there's, which happens in this dialogue, that it's, there is the my heart tells me news of my sustainer instead of the sustainer of all the worlds. And it's in private. It's may not have the language that we have talked about in terms of the speech of God to all mankind, which must be understandable and legible to all capacities. So it is a completely different conception, as was raised by Brother Ali, about absolute speech coming down to the level of understanding. Like one verse, as you also shared, Isra, can be and isn't potentially should be understood by all conscious human beings, whereas something you receive in private about your particular situation will not be relevant and even applicable or even understandable as to why you would do one thing over the other for someone else. That was helpful. If other people also have points, it helps bring out things that I'm missing or I'm not seeing, and other people are also sharing. But it helps construct a holistic framework. And there are, I'm sure, particular questions that someone can ask, like saying like, well, I interpret Quranic speech also. What is the difference between interpreting inspiration versus interpreting the speech of God? That could be a question. If other people feel so. All right. We have a comment. Agabe writes, someone can ask, does it mean that sometimes we need guidance that we cannot derive from constitution, revelation, and messengership? Or it is extra help for us from mercy of God? I think that's a good question to help clarify the matter. I'm taking a moment to collect my thoughts and words on the issue. I'm also understanding this question as, it wouldn't make sense to me that one could receive inspiration but not be subjected or have received revelation. So I can't see for myself at the moment that those two could happen in two different experiences. So someone who is aware of inspiration coming from a divine source must also have had cultivated the need and sought out and searched for that universal speech of the Creator. And it is within those. So, for example, going back to the examples of this mayor, and yes, in our modern day, I guess the only examples are that might speak to sovereignty are not positive ones, like dictatorships or totalitarianism. So, we'll work with the analogy we have with making changes to it. So the person who comes to the restaurant or is in the office, working closely with the mayor, it's not like the law that the mayor presented to the public does not apply or help him in relating his personal issues to the mayor. He is still subject to the order of the universe as laid out by revelation, as explained by the revelation. And within that order, he has particularities that are non-independent of the overall speech. So this is my beginning to understand your question, and I think it's a good one. Mm-hmm. Right. So the comment by Isra is the verse that says, remember me and I will remember you, or similar verses, in this case, call out to me and I will definitely respond, is a command. So that's interesting that it is a universal command binding on all beings that, call on me in your private, for your private needs. So we wouldn't know to use the form of private need, whether we call it supplication or dua and these forms, if we were not told about this in the form of universal speech. And the fact that it applies to every being, again, helps understand the fact that someone will only know to reach out to the Creator in the form of their private, for their private need and capacity, if they were told that they could and must, and that is the way in which the Creator responds. I think that helps me think about this in a little bit more clearer manner than I started with. So thank you for that, Isra. Agabit, do you have any thoughts? What do you think? All right. So while I'm sure he's typing, I want to come to this last part of the paragraph. Yeah, I think for many matters, you don't need to have a private conversation. Like, okay, if I try and think about that example again that Isra shared with us, let's say this person who wants his son to get a job, the process of applying for a job, the application system, the process, the requirements, those are universal. And he does not need to go to the mayor to be like, hey, can you tell me what's required for me to submit this application, when those are, in our world today, everything is public and available and applicable to everybody. So unless there's something, unfair going on in this example, but in our example of the absolute being, his will is what we understand, and his will works also in accordance to, or from our perspective, works from our perspective, like in accordance to the order in which we are and the way that we are created. And so if we follow the order, recognize things in their createdness, then we will be able to be conversant in those private manners that connect us and attach us to that absolute being and to that angelic side of inspiration. So in the example, going back, the overall process applies to everyone, but perhaps in that particular case, someone can ask for special advice, particular advice, direction on how to go about it. And that door, so to say, is open to everybody. So there's a universal aspect that inspiration is at all levels to all beings. And whoever follows the order, raises their capacity of receiving inspiration in the form that it is intended. But we are all receiving inspiration all the time. As I said, from within us, from the universe, we are in constant conversation, both in its universal sense, like call me, and in its private sense, in that I call him in my private, with my private need, when my private manner and capacity. Okay, so I'm happy to also dwell on the question further if other people have more thoughts, objections, and I think we all appreciate questions that help us be sure about what we're saying here, and not be, in my case, sometimes be lazy and just be like, yeah, I understand, but I might actually not understand it for myself. So, so coming towards the end of the paragraph, for he can manifest the address to the extent of its capacity and to the degree nearly 70,000 veils have been raised. Thus, however, much higher and more elevated is the decree of a king promulgated in respect of his supreme sovereignty than the insignificant speech of a common man, and however much more abundantly the effulgence of the sky in the sky may be benefited from the manifestation of its reflection in the mirror, and however greater is its superiority, to that degree the Quran of mighty stature is superior to all other speech and all other books. So this paragraph particularly, it's worded a little bit, let's say, it's worded a little bit awkward, I would say, but it is, as I understand, establishing, again, what the author is saying, the superiority of the Quran and the Quran of mighty stature, which we understand to be referring to the revelation in the universe or the signs in the universe that, again, are universally demonstrated to mankind. And he's saying that so I need actually help in like restructuring these sentences. But the first point that comes to my mind is that in the idea of inspiration has, or the concept of inspiration has veils or has obstacles, or let's say, not obstacles, but perhaps like things we need to be mindful of and be aware of. because it is not direct in the sense of not that it is not mediated, but direct in the sense that it is not given to us in clear speech, but rather we have to, it comes to us in some sort of thought, and we in our, in our mind translate that thought into words. And that has, let's say, those are veils. Like, I could be trying to interpret something based on something that I am feeling vulnerable about or weak about, and I want a certain decision to go a certain manner. Whereas revelation is direct, it's stated out directly, but it has other levels of veils in someone being able to draw the meaning for themselves in it. And so it only reveals to the extent of the capacity of the individual. Now, an example might help me and might help others is, and this is again something I've heard in these sessions, is that if the sun is shining and you stand outside, right, you are completely unobstructed by anything receiving the sunlight. That is the experience of revelation. And then again, your capacity to, you cannot stare directly at the sun, as we say, but in the light of the sun, you see the existence and the world around you, and you perceive it and you understand it, and you make use of it and let it guide you. As opposed to someone who might be in their bedroom and they open up the curtain or their window, the sunlight coming into their house will be, one, limited by, let's say, the size of the window, and two, by the amount of curtain that they are opening up. So that to me speaks to the experience of inspiration, in the sense that it is private to you in your house, and it is veiled by this curtain, and it is up to you on how you remove those, let's say remove, but also like develop your capacity, your awareness, your consciousness to distinguish between, what you need. And hence, the more you realize or are aware of your needs and your consciousness, the more you might open the curtain to this. And so there's no, in this case, there is a very distinct comparison between someone standing outside, receiving, not only the sunlight, which is going everywhere, but also being able to see everything with the help of it. And that speaks to the Quranic speech, as opposed to someone being inside. And so when comparing the two, it is obvious that someone standing outside, for him, he's completely immersed, completely lit, the things around them completely illuminated by the sun, as opposed to someone in their private home or room. And that speaks to the superior nature of the Quran of the mighty stature. Does that make sense? I'm sure there are points I missed. Your own thoughts and questions might help bring those out for each other. So I encourage your participation at this moment.
Assalamu alaikum. I would really just love to talk about how to strengthen one's ability to receive inspiration.
Yeah. Do you have thoughts to add to it and get us started?
Well, for me, the
you got mute.
If I cut off there. For me, the landmark that has become apparent is to affirm the createdness of an individual message. As long as I am blocking it being created, there's no potential way that it can be inspiration. I will continue to be suspicious of it, think it's irrelevant, think it's chance. No way take heed of it as guidance. So for me, that's probably the first landmark on this journey, is that I see the createdness. So that's, I think, one really important part. And then I'm wondering how to further strengthen that.
Thank you for that. I'm thinking that the process, to me, the process of cultivating oneself or their capacity and their sense of awareness and consciousness of their own self is the beginning. And that process, to me, does not look different from our approach to, it fundamentally is not different than, approaching divine speech to inspiration fundamentally, but what those speeches say to us, those can be different, or those significances can be distinguished, but the fundamental preparation is shared between both speeches. But Dr. Baradali, you have your hand up, so you can go ahead.
So far, I missed some part of it, just a short past. So far, I have 2 points to share with you. First of all, we have to know that we can communicate with our Creator directly, but know that this communication with my Creator, speaking to Him, waiting inspirations from Him, accepting my prayers, or accepting my prayers not exactly as I want, but asking Him, please, God, help me. I need this. For what? I need, for example, I am ill and I need health. For what? In order to be able to do this. But in order to be able to do that may not be good for me. So because I'm asking God to help me, God says, okay, I'll help you in another way. And the response comes from God in another way than I expected Him to respond me. So we have to understand that everything is created for us according to our capacity, according to our intention, and according to our understanding of our Creator. Then we have to know that we cannot go beyond our capacity and really receive something that we don't deserve. That is why we have to really speak to Allah in general terms, saying, if this health is good for me, for my eternal life, please give healing. If you think that my illness remains with me and it is good for me, please keep it, because I trust your wisdom, I trust your mercy for me. To have the prayers usually in general terms. We should not turn the prayers, because it is a way of communication, into a bargaining. For example, if you give me health, I will do this. But it is a bargaining. If you think that to do whatever you promise to God is good for you, you have to do it in any ways, whether He gives you health or not. But we have to be careful not to turn this communication with God in the form of a bargaining. Another point is somehow related to Inabe's question. I'm not sure if it's directly or not, but really tangent to it. we should be aware that some people may receive much clearer, more often inspiration from God. So, for example, in this inspiration, we may see a karama, which is not accustomed way of doing the things. God somehow favors him in this world and demonstrates his generosity to him because he needs some sort of encouragement from God to see that his prayer is accepted. He is regarded by God as a good person. It doesn't mean that this person is perfect in any way, in all ways. Maybe he has a good intention, he has a good capacity and good way of worshiping God in one area is according to his speciality, according to his capacity. That's why he favored him karama or inspiration. Maybe he saw a dream and 2 days later, he understood the dream was really or realized. Oh, you see, God is informing him beforehand. And then he is a favorable person in his eyes. Yes, he is, but it doesn't mean that in every aspect of his human qualities. Maybe in one, let's say, given an example in terms of education now, must be in biology, not in physics. And he doesn't understand political life, for example. He's a very good man and he has many karama, but he doesn't understand the economic situation of the country. He is not an economist. He is not a businessman. He doesn't know. We have to understand that if someone has received inspiration, doesn't mean that he has approval from God that in every aspect of his life or his area where he speaks is approved by God and confirmed by God. So we have to know that, yes, this person is well received by Allah, but within his capacity, according to his interest. So 2 points. We should not, I'm just wrapping up, we should not turn our prayers with God so that we will ask, he will respond in many ways into a form of bargaining. The second point is, if someone has a great virtue, it's a very pious man, it doesn't mean that he knows which school I should go and which subject I should study. If he doesn't understand from education, he doesn't understand from education. He should know his limit. But sometimes we accept or reject a person totally because he's a good man, accept his advice in every matter. He's a bad man, and we never take any advice from this bad man, according to us. So we have to know the limitations of the people who receive these inspirations from God. Thank you.
Jazakallah. Yeah, and I think at some point the author also will emphasize this difference that the inspiration, even of the highest level, and in this case represented by saints, is still not the level of a prophet, in which case we talked about that inspiration is private, particular, specialized, but not perfect or all-encompassing or comprehensive, such that one would expect from the speech of God in the definition of revelation, that it must be applicable, relevant, and helpful, beneficial in all regards no matter what, as represented by the Prophet and prophethood.
If I can also add
Please.
very quickly, this idea of trusting God and surrender and also accepting our createdness, it seems to be the key in discerning the specific inspirations, because oftentimes we are given a limited capacity to plan and arrange and think about, reason about things, but that capacity is given to us to, as Imam Mursi explains, it's given as a kind of a measure to appreciate divine arrangement and wisdom and so on. And what often happens is that there's a clash between, I want to arrange things and I want to tell God to fill in certain gaps for me because I can't, control everything. I need to shift from that mode and say, well, it's okay if I don't necessarily see how this is going to work out, or then I am doing my part. At the same time, I am doing it in a state of trust and surrender. If I am created, then of course I'm going to surrender to the one who's arranging everything and creating. So then we are more open to inspiration, because inspiration, as Dr. Yamin always says, it always comes, but then we are so blocked, in our horizontal way of thinking and arranging, that we say, oh, this is not possible, or why should I pursue that thing? And so that is an important aspect. So I just wanted to kind of put a highlight on what Dr. Ali and Inabe and you guys said.
Thank you. It is helpful. The emphasis again that my conversation with my creator should be from the understanding that the absolute and conscious creator is teaching me through, like the trust is that I know that this is a form of teaching, whatever that I get, rather than saying like, I have some sort of blind faith in and accept whatever God will give, and that's my trust in him. But rather the trust is that it is a moment of teaching and direction and guidance. And so I should not be trying to dictate by bargaining what I need, but rather trusting in the wise and let's say teaching qualities that my sustainer must demonstrate for my life, or for me to understand or be responsible to what he has revealed to us. So it's time to conclude, and I will, if there are any last remaining thoughts, feel free to raise your hand or type in the chat box. And if otherwise, I will conclude with the dua as we usually do. Subhanaka la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal alimul hakim, wa akhiru da'wana anil hamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Ameen. Jazakallah everybody. Jazakumullah everyone.
Jazakumullah khair.
Yeah, I wish you all a very, very happy, I guess. They're all, when converting English to our traditional vocabulary, it all sounds very confusing, like, water, agua. So I wish you all a happy Eid, and Eid Mubarak to everyone.
Assalamu alaikum. Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair.